So do you ever see the spay van? Is that what they call it?
It's called the mobile clinic, and actually the ASPCA has 5 mobile clinics. And what the mobile clinic does is that they go around the city and they provide low-cost or even no-cost spay-neuter, both of owned pets, like people's own pets, but also of groups who are helping stray animals that don't have homes. They'll provide that for them at no cost as well.
Yeah, because they did that on our block too. There was a vacant lot with tons of cats, and they came and did like a spay and release sort of thing.
Yeah, it's called TNR, Trap, Neuter, Release.
Oh, okay.
The cats are trapped in a humane trap, of course. It's more looks like kind of a long cage. And then they're spayed or neutered, and then they have a period of recovery where they're actually fed and kind of, kept in the trap, and, they're kept clean and comfortable. And then they're released once it's safe.
I have one question. If there's so many stray cats in the city of New York, how come there's so many rats?
Well, there aren't very many rats where there are stray cats.
I see.
For example, in this backyard that she's talking about, you will never see a rat.
Okay.
But
stay away as soon as they
But
get
there
a
are
sample.
areas where there are, for example, a lot of times you'll see rats like on the sidewalks when you're walking along. Well, these stray cats tend to be back in courtyards, backyards, alleys,
Oh, that's what's pushing the rats out onto the sidewalk.
Yeah, I don't know. But so, and there are neighborhoods, the neighborhoods really vary. There are neighborhoods where, for example, the Upper East Side, you will never see a stray cat.
Right.
It depends on the neighborhood that you're in. It tends to be the lower income neighborhoods.
Okay, now let me, one thing I wanted to ask you about, I'm going to just bring up a name, of course, it's been in the media, Michael Vick. And do you work in the medical and not the enforcement edge,
Yeah.
But I imagine you get a lot of the results of the enforcement. And what was going on? Can you talk about his case in particular, or in general the case of people who raise animals, whatever the breed of animal or type of animal for sport, and in that way, which of course is illegal, but
it's a huge problem. I can't talk about his legal case because, of course, that's his legal case, and I don't want to comment on it. From our our perspective, because we are trying to help those dogs and help with the situation.
That's interesting.
But just in general, there are all over this country, particularly in some of the more urban areas, but everywhere, there are people who basically participate in dog fighting, even things like cockfighting, which of course are roosters.
Right.
And that's the ASPCA. We also save a lot of those roosters, believe it or not, that are used for fighting. And obviously it's incredibly cruel.
Even
the animals.
Jerry?
The animals suffer.
Remember that in Jerry
Seinfeld?
Seinfeld?
Jerry Seinfeld.
I'm like, what are you
They
saying?
named
Little
a
Jerry.
rooster after Jerry.
He probably wasn't a fighting rooster.
Right? No, he wasn't.
He was a loser.
But so it's just awful what they do to the dogs.
I know it's terrible. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to laugh.
No, but
It
little
is
Jerry,
terrible.
right? Yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, you have to laugh. You
A
have
little
to,
bit.
yeah.
I mean, but of course,
Otherwise
the
you'll cry,
thought, the thought of in the back of a store or some place is
this dog fighting.
Yeah, it's going on. It's terrible, and obviously the public.
It's almost like you can't believe that it's happening right here in this country or in this city because it just seems so insane.
Right.
Now, what about situations like emergencies? Because we had a friend on the show that's written a book about what you do in crises, and when he was
For
on
your
the
pet,
show,
or just in general.
In general, it was his book, but it's called Preparedness Now.
Oh, I see.
But part of our conversation with him did involve pets. Like, should an area need to be evacuated?
Yeah.
What happens with everybody's pets?
Right.
And so I wondered if the ASPCA had any kind of plan or program for
absolutely.
that situation.
There are a number of staff at the ASPCA that have what's called disaster training. For example, at our hospital we have a number of doctors, and certain doctors have disaster training. They've been trained to go, and then if something happens, the ASPCA will deploy people. So if there's a flood or this or that happens,
like Katrina,
the ASPCA
for example,
had tons of people at Katrina for just weeks and weeks.
Yeah,
and weeks.
I was going to ask.
But even other things that have happened, like some of the flooding that was happening in the Midwest earlier this year, they will send veterinary technicians, veterinarians, all kinds of people that are trained in disaster response to help the people and the animals. So it's a big part of what they do.
Right. And now another thing is these large cats and other tigers, exotic animals.
Yes.
What is it? I know it's like, I'm just curious. What is the law on that? I mean, are you allowed to have these kind of animals?
No, you're not allowed to have these kind of
So
animals.
how come people do? And obviously they're sold, and there's a market for them.
Well, there's a black market for everything.
Okay.
I mean, there's a black market for everything in this world. But in most jurisdictions,
Yeah.
you know, obviously every state and county is different, so I can't speak to the law in every single county. But for the most part, you're not allowed to have these kind of big cats. But whether, you know, regardless of the law, it's what's more important is that it's just a terrible, terrible idea, both for the people and for this big cat.
animal,
You
yeah.
can't give them, it's not possible to give them the life that they need. A lot of times they're mutilated. People will cut off the tips of their digits so that they won't have claws, because obviously, you know, they're cute when they're teeny weeny weeny. And
they
then
get
pretty soon they
huge.
grow to be hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and, it's, you know,
then-
what are you going to do? And they're
you can
very
see what they
dangerous.
do with
ape.
I'm thinking about right. That, I wasn't even thinking about that, but the
gorilla,
chimpanzee.
chimpanzee,
Yeah, it's the
that
same
murder
exact
woman.
kind of thing. I mean, that's when an
And then
animal
the
is in a
tiger
situation.
The
Oh, Siegfried
performers,
and Roy,
yeah, right, their
yeah.
tiger, like that was a terrible thing, but like,
Right.
they're
But
strong.
They say that
They
wasn't
can-
an attack. I mean, their
Right.
point of view is that it was not an assault. That, I mean, they still work with that animal.
But the
so-
point is that these are wild animals,
Yeah.
and it doesn't
Not
matter. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if when they were little they were cute. It doesn't even matter if everything seems fine most of the time, because these are wild animals that can revert at any moment to a prey drive or to whatever would be there, and
uncontrollable.
they don't belong in human homes. You know, it's not fair to them, because then you put them in a situation like this chimpanzee who ended up, you know, being killed. You know, he was in a situation that wasn't fair to him.
Right.
You know, just in you know, when I talk to friends who are in exotic animal medicine, you know, I have a friend that worked with Jane Goodall and worked with chimpanzees
Sure.
for years, and
Okay.
she said you could have predicted that from day one, because what it was is that he had reached adolescence.
It's an age thing.
Yes, he had reached adolescence, and that's the behavior that he was starting to display. And she said that was completely predictable. This isn't
Okay.
some weird, aberrant, you know, bizarre thing that happened. How could this
Right.
happen? She said any chimpanzee
Anyone
expert could
knows
tell you
this
that
is
this
what would
was
happen.
going to happen, and it happens all the time. And this was a very dramatic
Right.
case because of the results.
Well,
But
what about then, you know, because that chimp started out as being used in movies, and it was used in commercials, and
Yes.
from what I saw, I
Right.
don't know that much about it, but
Yeah.
what about in the entertainment, circuses, zoos,
Right.
the use in commercials and things like that,
Yeah.
of different animals? I mean, is that still wide, you know, is mistreatment under those circumstances?
well, it's a
widespread?
lot more controlled than it used to be.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, you know, the chimps that you generally see in commercials and things like that, what people don't know is that those tend to be very young.
It's an age
Juvenile.
thing, right?
It's an age thing. So everything's fine and dandy when they're a
Up
year
to
or
a
two old. I
point.
mean, they're babies. You know, then they grow older. But in a broader sense, I do think there's a lot more control than there used to be. And if you look at the old westerns where they, I mean, there would literally be like having the horses fall
Right.
down and get injured. And now you're not allowed to actually harm animals when you're making a movie or something like that. So, I mean,
Right.
there's still problems, but things are a lot better than they were, you know, 50
Okay.
years ago.
And now
So I just want to remind everybody that we're
Yes.
talking to Dr. Louise Murray. This is Let 'em Talk. And if you want to go to the ASPCA website, that's just aspca.org.
ASPCA.org.
And you can find out about the April campaign,
and we're wearing orange.
because we're ahead of April.
We're at April, it's tomorrow.
April Eve.
Right.
That's right.